Welcome to In the Garden with Flower Hill Farm. I'm your host, Nicole Pitt. This is the very first episode of a brand new podcast all about the art of growing. We are partnering with Botanical Interests to take a closer look at some of our favorite varieties and discovering new ones along the way. Now, as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about here on the very first episode, it brought me back to my childhood, my first experiences in the garden. And those were in my grandparents' backyard, like so many of us. My grandfather had some simple raised beds, and I just remember being a kid and thinking it was the most magical place to be. My cousin Vanessa actually just reminded me the other day how we used to steal the salt and pepper shaker from my grandparents' kitchen, go out, we would raid the garden and we'd bring tomatoes and cucumbers into our tree house and we'd just devour them. So we have so many great memories in the garden and fun stories. And here in the garden with Flower Hill Farm, we want to take a closer look at those favorite varieties and talk about the history of them, where they come from, and just learn more. So I thought I would start here by talking about a few of my favorite varieties. And the very first one, which is the one my grandfather insists is the best for making sauce. Of course, my grandfather is Italian, and it's the San Marzano tomato. Everyone loves this. It's one of the most popular Roma tomatoes. Some people call it a plum tomato, and it is just delicious. So I thought we'd dive into the history of the San Marzano tomato here. I actually brought some of those with me. For those of you who are watching this on the Botanical Interests YouTube channel, I've got a little quart of some of my San Marzano tomatoes here, and they are so delicious and juicy. But let's talk about some of the history of the San Marzano tomato. Now, the story goes that in 1770, the very first seed was actually a gift from the leaders of Peru to the leaders of Naples in southern Italy. Now, it's near, you may have guessed it, San Marzano, Italy. Now, my ancestors come from Raccagorga, Italy, and I did a little deep dive to see how far away my ancestors are from San Marzano, and it's only about a 2-hour drive, so it's a possibility that some of my ancestors were actually growing San Marzano tomatoes a couple hundred years ago. Now, San Marzano is an open pollinated variety, and that means that it breeds true from generation to generation, so it's a favorite for those who like to save their seeds and use them again the following year. San Marzanos are also indeterminate, which we will discuss coming up in just a little bit. Now, not only do they make the best spaghetti sauce, but they also make a delicious ketchup as well. When people found out that I was selling San Marzano tomatoes here in my garden center, they were coming from up to an hour away just to get those started plants. They're absolutely delicious. Okay, moving on now to the black Krim. This is another favorite heirloom tomato. It makes a delicious tomato sandwich, and it grows nice and plump, and it has that purple color on top. You know, that one that you see that must make the perfect looking heirloom tomato. Now, this variety was actually introduced to the United States in 1990 by a Swedish seed saver named Lars Olav Rosenstrom. The Black Krim is one of my absolute favorite varieties. Now, we can't talk about tomatoes without talking about a cherry tomato, and everyone, at least in my experience here at the garden center, is coming here for the Sun Golds. The Sun Gold tomatoes are famous for their incredibly sweet, bright orange color as well. Believe it or not, this popular cherry tomato was first introduced in Japan, where people didn't like it. It just didn't take off there. It wasn't until the seeds headed over to the UK, where they were bred there, and people just fell in love with the delicious variety. Sun Gold tomatoes were introduced in 1992. So again, really not that old. Well, coming up on In the Garden with Flower Hill Farm, we are going to sit down with our very first guest. I'm so excited. So many of you guys are going to know who this is. It's Jess Sowards from Roots and Refuge. Now, she's going to break down the difference between determinate and indeterminate tomatoes and talk about one of her favorite ways to preserve tomatoes. We'll be right back. Welcome back to In the Garden with Flower Hill Farm, and we have our very first guest, and I'm so excited. So many of you are going to know exactly who this is. We're welcoming Jess from Roots and Refuge. Now, Jess, I started watching you way back in 2018, and you have been a huge inspiration for my gardening journey. But for those of our audience members who are not familiar with Roots and Refuge, tell us a little bit about how you got started in the gardening world.
Oh, goodness. Accidentally, actually. I did not know much about content. Of course, this was like the wild, wild west of content creation, I think, back in like the middle 2000 teens. But I started sharing pictures on Instagram of like my chickens in my garden. And all of a sudden, these strangers started to like them. And I'm like, that's weird. I guess people really like chickens. So fast forward a couple years, I started my YouTube channel. And honestly, I was just stupid excited about the garden. I love growing things. It is such a passion for me. I guess that was contagious. And through social media, I really found my tribe. I was used to people's eyes kind of glazing over when I would geek out on the garden. And all of a sudden, I found the people who were just as excited as I was. So the rest is history. That's been several years ago, and I'm still just plugging along.
You might be to blame for all of the cattle pennel trellises that are everywhere I drive around. So today we're talking about tomatoes, and I know you're a huge lover of tomatoes. You famously have said that store-bought tomatoes taste like disappointment. Tell us a little bit about your favorite varieties of growing tomatoes.
Oh goodness, this is like asking which of my kids is my favorite. I pare it down yearly. This year, I exercised great restraint, and I only grew. In the end, it ended up being about 30 varieties.
Only 30.
In the past, I've exceeded 100 in one year before. My favorite are Dr. Ritchie's Yellow, which is like a big yellow slicer, very similar to Kellogg's Breakfast, which is also really great. I love Paul Robeson. There's one called Climbing Triple Crop that makes its way back into my garden pretty regularly. Abe Lincoln. I love a really big slicer. I think that's obvious in my favorites list because I love a tomato sandwich.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Tell people who are not familiar with a tomato sandwich, if there are any, it's so simple, but it's the best thing ever.
I mean, toasted bread, a layer of mayonnaise, and then a tomato with salt and pepper. Slice.
Exactly.
You know,
It's
you can
the most.
do a real thick slice. Yeah, it's so good. A thick slice, or you can do a thin slice of a couple different colors of tomatoes if you want to like really make it fancy. But God, I love a tomato sandwich.
I think I had one probably for breakfast the entire month of August last year. It was my go-to.
It's fitting. It's fitting. That's the honor the tomato deserves, I think.
Okay, so there are a lot of people who get a little bit confused when we talk about determinate versus indeterminate tomatoes. Could you talk to us a little bit about the difference between those and if there is one that you favor over the other or if there's a purpose for each?
Yeah, so a determinate tomato is a tomato that essentially has like a determined amount of blooms that it's going to set. They typically don't get as tall. They're stockier and they're great for smaller spaces or if you want all of your harvest to come on at the same time. Say you want to spend 1 week at the end of the summer, 2 weeks doing lots and lots of canning. You know, if you did a big crop of determinate tomatoes, you would more or less get your harvest in a more compact window. Whereas indeterminate tomatoes are varieties that once planted and supported, if you continue to support them with their nutritional needs, with water, and with actual support for the plant, they can get 11, 12 feet tall if you live in a long season place. And they'll just keep setting blooms as long as the conditions support that. So that extends your harvest. Maybe it's not as much at once. I prune tomatoes pretty heavily because I live in a really humid place. So I typically grow indeterminates because you don't want to prune a determinate heavily as it's not going to get taller and set more blooms. You're really cutting down your harvest on that. So mostly I grow indeterminates. However, there is a big field. I live where a lot of produce is grown commercially in our country. And there's this big field of determinate tomatoes that I drive past every August. They plant them in the second half of the season. And I'm just like, wouldn't it be cool to have a whole big area that looks like that? So I don't know. It's wooing me this year. I might have to make a little change next year.
So you mentioned pruning tomatoes. What are the benefits of giving a good prune to a tomato plant?
It's really dependent on where you live. I mean, obviously, if you live in a place that the humidity is really low or your season's not really long, there might not be a real benefit of pruning. You may just be cutting back your harvest. However, if you live in a place with very high humidity or that gets a lot of rain where you're going to deal with blight or fungal disease, pruning allows for airflow. And the other thing that it does is you're going to be cutting off all the side branches, or we call them suckers, of your tomatoes, which means that plant in its root system is going to be able to really force its focus into growing the fruits that it does set. So on average in my garden, all those varieties that I listed, they all grow between 1 and 2 pounds on average. I've had 3+ plus pound tomatoes.
Wow.
Because when you have the whole plant focusing on the fruit it sets, you get larger and healthier fruits. And because they are pruned down, I can plant my plants a lot closer together. So I plant them every 20 inches, whereas if I were going to let them bush out, obviously I would have to give them like 3 or 4 feet.
They can really take over a garden space very quickly if you let them.
Yes.
And I actually try to stake mine, and sometimes the plants just get too heavy and the stakes end up falling over even. You need a good T-post to stake. Now, do you use that, what's it called? The Florida Georgia weave? What is that weave? How do you stake yours?
I pretty much do cattle panels on T-posts.
Yeah.
And with that heavy pruning, I cut up T-shirt strips usually. Sometimes I'll use that plastic tie tape, but in the sake of using less plastic, I'll cut up T-shirts and tie the plants up to support them. And typically that works pretty well. At the end of the season, a lot of times they're kind of flopped over the top and it gets really messy. But what garden doesn't get messy by the end of the season?
They're the best. Now, because you do grow a lot of indeterminate tomatoes, they're not all ripening together at the same time. Talk to us about the method that you've used, the freezer method, where you throw everything in the freezer. And then, tell our listeners about that.
I have a lot of kids and a pretty busy life. So though there are definitely times I wish I could just drop everything in garden, I can't. And so whenever this fruit is coming in the summer, it's hot. I'm picking it very ripe, which means sometimes I have maybe a 48-hour window before it starts getting too soft and starts bringing gnats and stuff into my house. I don't want to leave my kitchen table covered in fruit all summer and potentially risk wasting it. So I do what's called coring and scoring, which is basically where you take your fruit, you cut the core out, which is that hard middle underneath where the stem was, and then you score a little cross or an X in the bottom of the fruit. And then you put all of those fruits in a gallon-sized freezer bag and stick them in the deep freezer or in your regular freezer. And then whenever you're ready, and maybe you have a little bit of fruit coming in at a time and you've got to wait a week or so to fill a bag, or maybe you just don't have time to process, you can pull those bags out, put them in your sink, and let them thaw. And at that point, you can just very easily slip all the skins off those tomatoes, no boiling them to get the skins off, and then process them as you would have fresh. It is definitely a time saver. It definitely helps to put off the processing while you're having to stake and prune and do all the garden work in the peak of the season whenever you're harvesting. And I actually really like not just the ease of when I get to process, but it's just a lot easier to work with them once they've been frozen.
Yeah, the skins slide right off. It's so much easier.
Yeah.
So
if you've ever stood there boiling batches, you know like how
the kitchen gets hot, especially in the South. I'm up in New York, so we're looking for the extra heat at the end of the season. So you mentioned that you pick yours when they're ripe. Do you ever do the blush method, where as soon as it starts to blush, take it off and then let it ripen on its own?
Yeah, so this is actually one of the hottest topics that I have ever talked about. It's crazy the stuff people will get heated about. I did a lot of research about this, and I found that, like, scientifically, once a tomato has blushed, meaning it's begun changing its color, it has begun producing the gases that actually give you all that ripe flavor. And so, from a scientific standpoint, your tomatoes should not taste different vine ripen versus picking as soon as they've blushed and continuing to ripen in your house. The reason why I think a lot of people think vine ripened tomatoes taste better is tomatoes grow when it's hot. And so if you pick your tomatoes when it is very hot, and especially if they haven't been watered in a day or two, you're going to get a lot of concentration in those sugars. So it's really less to do with the ripening. I will typically leave them to ripen on the vine if that's an option. If I have a thunderstorm coming, they're going to get a whole lot of water. The skins are probably going to split. It's going to dilute the flavor. I'll pick them on, less ripe. The biggest thing is you don't want to pick them still fully green because you don't have those gases. And that is why store-bought tomatoes taste like disappointment, is so many of them are picked green so that they can be shipped to their point of sale in time before they've rotted. And we don't want disappointing tomatoes.
Do you know, do they give ethylene to the tomatoes that they pick green to encourage them to ripen? Do they do it artificially?
I'm not sure. I know they do that with some things. Like I know that's how they ripen bananas and
Yeah.
stuff like that that are commercially sold in the US. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the case. But I do know that so many of the fruits that we're buying, like here in, I mean, throughout the South, where tomatoes grow, either way, we're buying them from like South America and
Yeah.
from places out of the country. I mean, those guys have gone on a journey to get to us.
They sure have. I have found I have to harvest mine at blush stage because number one, I have a horrible mouse problem. And as soon as they start to be ripe, the mice will eat them before I can get to them. And then number two, my season is so much shorter. I've already had a frost in early September. So I had to go out there and if I saw a tiny bit of pink, I was grabbing them. So they're in my garage right now. I've got
Yep.
3 crates of tomatoes just ripening in there and they're going to be perfect. And I can't wait to, but
Yeah.
so, what is next for Roots and Refuge? What's on the calendar here in the next year or so? Anything exciting going on? I know you've had so many expansions, and talk to me about what's next for you guys.
Yeah. So we've taken this like radical stance of slowing down in the last year. My oldest son graduated high school and 2 years ago, and then last year my second son graduated high school, and it just rocked my world in such a crazy way. So I brought my youngest three back home to homeschool, and I've been so focusing on them. So I mean, for the first time in a long time, I'm not really thinking about expansion and growth. I'm really just thinking about fully savoring what is. So I'm really looking forward to like this winter gardening season next spring, really involving my boys. They've been really hands-on through homeschool on the farm, and I'm really just savoring right now. And it's so sweet.
I'm in the exact same spot. We dropped my daughter off at college for the first time a few weeks ago, and it's rough, Mom. It's rough. But my other one, I only have a 15-year-old left, so I feel like, oh my gosh, like these next few years are just gonna fly by. Ugh. So yeah, I'm totally with you there. But I could talk to you all day. You'll have to come back soon, and we'll talk something else. We'll talk garlic or basil or something fun.
Yes.
Okay,
I can talk about all of it.
Thank you for being my guinea pig, the very first guest on In the Garden with Flower Hill Farm. And we'll have to have you back. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome back to In the Garden with Flower Hill Farm. And this is a segment we are calling Sow and Tell. And the first thing we're going to do here today is introduce producer Ramsey. Ramsey, hi, how are you?
Doing well, Nicole. How about yourself?
I'm doing great this morning. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Ramsey. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've been producing podcasts for over 10 years now. And I've worked with farmers all across the country, and happy to be working on this show on our first episode, and looking forward to our first segment of Sow and Tell. It's exciting.
I know. I'm really excited when we get all of those videos and audios from the guests. But for now, we had to kind of source the crowd on social media. And I went ahead on both the Flower Hill Farm Facebook page and the Instagram page. And I asked people to tell me about their favorite tomatoes. And I do notice, though, that you're wearing a mayo and tomato shirt. Do you have some experience with those delicious sandwiches we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Bitter Southerner in making this shirt. I mean, you know, I think our national sandwich of the South, and I've heard people all across the country love the same sandwich as well, is basically as simple as it is. It's sliced tomato on a, white bread of choice with a little bit of mayo, and, some people like to put salt and pepper on theirs, like myself, and that's it. Back to Hickory, North Carolina, where I spent most of my summers as a child. My granddad was a farmer and a postman, and every time I would go to visit them, my grandmother would be like, "Hey, Ramsey, go out to the farm and go pick me, 3 or 4 slicers," and she would make us sandwiches, and that was it: tomato, mayo, and bread.
There is absolutely nothing like it.
That's that thing that says, "Summer's here."
Perfect. Let's get into some comments from, they're not followers yet, but they're followers to be. So why don't you start off with a couple of them?
Let's see here. Kimberly, she loves a Cherokee purple. It is sweet, meaty, and perfect for a juice dripping down your chin tomato sandwich. And Kimberly's from Deerfield, New York. I can't agree more with you. I mean, that sounds like a perfect tomato to use for a tomato sandwich, and I can just imagine everything that you're describing there.
I actually grow probably an entire birdie bed of Cherokee Purple.
Okay. That's amazing. What do you like to do with your tomato sandwiches or tomatoes?
Well, I do a lot of different things. One of my favorite things to do that I just started doing a couple years ago is making ketchup. Yeah, I didn't know how easy it was to make ketchup, and it tastes so much better than what you get in the bottle. And I like because I can control the sugar content, and I'm really focusing on my health lately, and that's important to me. So making homemade ketchup is my new favorite thing to do with my homegrown tomatoes.
Do you do those with Cherokee Purples, or is that a different type of variety of tomato?
So far, I've actually just used San Marzanos because, as we all know, they are very meaty. They don't have a lot of juice, so it's better for ketchup because it makes a nice thick ketchup. But I don't think that Cherokee Purple would be bad as a ketchup. I think it would be delicious. But I like to eat Cherokee Purple fresh.
Awesome. Good to hear. Let's see here. I got a Jessica. She's a top fan of yours.
Woo-hoo.
She loves Sun Gold in the cherry category and any brandy wine, red, pink, or yellow. I am a big fan of cherry tomatoes as well. It's one of the easiest things to just pick and eat right off the vine, right into your mouth. I mean, it's an amazing experience for me. How about yourself?
I think I ended up, so the problem with owning a nursery is that I get to bring home all the plants that are left over at the end of the season, which happen to be, I grow way too many tomatoes. I mean, probably over 1,000 tomato plants for sale. And my community is only about 2,000 people. So you can see the problem here. But I brought home probably 36 Sun Gold cherry plants and I grew them all. So I have a plethora of Sun Gold and I sell those at my farm stand. I sell them here at my shop during the summer and they're everyone's favorite. Everyone talks about how sweet they are. Some people are a little bit turned off by the orange color, but once they taste them, they're like, oh, okay, this is a delicious tomato.
What is the trick to growing Sun Gold cherry tomatoes?
You know what? They are so disease resistant. They're kind of a sure thing. They also tolerate drought well, and they don't get those things that you often see on tomatoes like a blight or a fungus. They're just an extremely disease resistant variety. Excellent to grow. I think even new growers can just throw it, even if all you have is a 5-gallon bucket, throw it in a 5-gallon bucket and you're going to get a plethora of delicious orange cherry tomatoes from that plant.
What is the best thing you like to do with your Sun Gold?
Oh, I just eat those fresh, but also they taste like candy if you dehydrate them. So, sun-dried tomatoes, you can't go wrong.
Awesome.
Yes. Yeah, you know what? I have to read this one because it's my Aunt Joanne, and my Aunt Joanne is in her 80s, and I love that she commented on here. And Aunt Joanne says, Roma tomatoes. She says they are plump and meaty, and I know, so this is my huge Italian family, and we are just a fan of the Romas. And in fact, most of my Italian family lives in Rome, New York. So we love the Roma tomatoes. Oh, she's so cute. I love you. Thank you, Aunt Joanne, for participating in my little survey here. We also had some people on Instagram, and they were really a fan of the green zebra tomatoes, which is a variety I've never grown. So I think I might start growing that next year. This comment right here is from Wisco Jardin, which I assume is Wisconsin. Oh, yep, right there. It says Central Wisconsin. So they said green zebra, it's the perfect size, so tasty, beautiful color, grows uniformly without blemishes. And that's always something you want to look for in a tomato because then you don't have to worry about cutting sections out of it that get a little brown or black or disease. So you can just use the whole tomato without worrying about that. So that one's on my my list to grow next year. Okay, let's take a look at one more comment and then we'll let you guys know how you can take part in the Show and Tell segment. This one is actually from one of my hometown ladies. Her name is Piper. She is from Boonville, New York. And Piper simply states that the best tomatoes are the ones you can taste the sunshine in. And I think that wraps it up pretty nicely with any delicious tomato. Am I right? Ramsey, what do you think?
I think so. I think that pretty much is any tomato out there that's been in the sun. So that's a good way to I agree with her wholeheartedly, or whole tomatoly.
Whole tomatoey. Okay. All right, guys, that'll do it for the first episode of In the Garden, but we want to get you guys involved. This whole segment is all about you and your garden inspirations. You guys can send us video clips, try to keep it 30 seconds or less, or audio clips, or just paragraphs, and I'll read it out loud. You can go ahead and send it to the email address that's in the description of the show. You'll find it in the show notes. And send us those clips. Keep them coming. They don't have to be tomato specific. We've got a lot of different topics coming up. We'll be chatting about garlic. We'll be talking cut flowers. You guys know how much I love those flowers, and any vegetable that you can think of. If you guys have discovered something new, share it with me because I want to know. Okay, so that's what this So and Tell segment is all about. Thank you so much for joining us on this very first episode. I am very excited to dive deep into different topics every week and share with you guys some of my garden inspirations along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to In the Garden wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts, and we will see you next week in the garden.